What up, world, and welcome to another episode of the South African Spice podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, and that is none other than one of my nephews, Kishan Nadasen. Now, Kishan is one of the middle nephews and is actually with us in the Netherlands, so we're super excited to be doing this interview in person. So hi, Kishan, and welcome to the South African Spice podcast.
Hi, I'm happy to be here with my favorite auntie.
That's correct. Right answer. Now, Kishan, for the audience, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, I am a South African Indian male. I grew up in Roodepoort in Florida. I'm born in 2004, 20 years old, soon to be 20 years old. And I grew up with my mother, my auntie, and my granny, and my 3 brothers. Currently, I am aspiring to be a pastry chef. I just finished my first year in patisserie. I am graduating actually on Saturday. And I hope to be working soon so I can get my career started. I want to do a lot of traveling as well and a little bit more studying.
Because your auntie said you have to.
Yeah, basically.
This auntie of yours, huh?
Horrible sometimes.
Terrible behavior. So now that we know a little bit about you, let's talk a little bit about your childhood, kind of. I don't think these are conversations that we've actually really had. So what I'm very eager to know from you is your experience of being an Indian child, growing up in an area that wasn't predominantly Indian. So, I also grew up there, but I didn't start off my childhood there. You did. At what point did you actually notice that you were an Indian child?
So I was very young when I noticed it, actually. I was in grade 1, 6 years old. I was the only child in my class taking off for Eid and for Diwali, as a matter of fact. In South Africa, most of our holidays are based around the Christian calendar, so not everybody does get off Eid and Diwali. And being one of 2 boys in the grade, I was actually allowed to take off the days and spend time with their family. I think I picked it up then. But I think it was just the holidays that I noticed. There wasn't a big difference in treatment or who I was or who the person next to me was or in front of me. I sat with everybody in class. We always talked. I think nobody understood why I took off these holidays, but they all assumed it was like Christmas, so it didn't really affect me, but that was when I first noticed it.
And as you got older and you kept doing this year on year, did you have friends eventually ask you, but why, and what does the day mean, and did you have to explain it?
So I did, and at first I couldn't, because then again I also didn't know what it was about.
Do you even know now?
A little bit. I know a little bit about it. So for Eid, I couldn't really explain much. I just had to go on whatever my granny told me, because she is Muslim, and I would explain about the fasting and what they do after fasting and why we do celebrate it. Diwali, I couldn't really explain that. I think most people know it as the Festival of Lights, but when I explained it, I just said you can compare it to Eid and Christmas, and that's the best as I could explain it at the time. But I think with the internet and with Google, I think a lot of people found out for themselves, so they didn't really have to ask me questions about it. I think the biggest question they did have about it was the food we ate. They always wanted to know the different flavors of sweets and how we cooked our meals and things like that.
So now you having a sweet tooth and kind of being the one who always went for sweet stuff, did you have a hard time understanding the concept of a sweetmeat? Because the word sweetmeat is not what you would describe as something that's dessert.
I didn't actually, because I think growing up in a very Indian household in terms of the holidays that we celebrated, I think it was always generally explained. It was explained by not explaining it. It was just generally called it, so we accepted it.
But then when you explained it to friends?
They wouldn't really question it, because I always told them that this is what we call a sweetmeat. It's a form of pastry or sweets. Like we have gulab jam, we have jalebi. It could be compared to other things like a pretzel or, anything, a cook sister. So that's how I would compare it to. But personally, I didn't really question it. What I do question is, what is it called? I was told it's a sweetmeat. I accepted it. I moved on with my life.
What's your favorite sweetmeat?
Gulab jam.
Really?
Yeah.
Not barfi?
No. I like it. I know a lot of people like barfi. I know I got a lot of pre-orders for barfi when I get back home. But gulab jam is my favorite. I think it's perfectly balanced compared to barfi.
Just when you think you know a child. So with these religious holidays and the fact that you got to celebrate 2 different religious holidays, or in actual fact 3, it speaks a lot to how you kids grew up in a home that had different religions, different practicing religions. And how was that for you compared to your friends that generally had one religion being practiced in their homes?
It was different because that was the hard part to explain. So instead of getting questions about what we celebrated and what the holidays meant, it's why we celebrated and why I celebrated so many. I think it was confusing at first because I used to go to mosque with my grandfather, I used to go to temple with my mother, and church with my mother. So with that, I came to understand a lot, but I also came to question a lot, and it was confusing while I was younger, but as I got older, I started to understand where it's not really about what I celebrated or how I celebrated, it's about what I understood and what I related to. But I think it was a good experience because it exposed me to a lot of other South Africans, especially not just Indians, but to all South Africans and how they celebrated Christianity or Islam, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to question each faith and which one would I want to follow. And I ended up being Catholic. So that's not something I actually grew up with, but something I chose.
But you also went through a phase where, because you were questioning so much, you didn't really have one particular path that you believed in, and it was more on a spiritual level.
Yeah, so I think that was a confusing part for me because I used to go to mosque with my grandfather and he tried to explain it to me, but I guess Islam I didn't really understand, and I always wanted to understand it, I just couldn't. So that was confusing. And then we came to Tamil. My mom was Tamil, and she tried to explain it to me. It was also a bit confusing, so I also didn't understand that. As well as Christianity, I know even though most of it is in English, everybody tried to explain it to me. I didn't understand that. So eventually, I just figured that, okay, maybe there is something out there. I just don't know what it is yet, or I don't know which faith to believe in yet. So there was a stage where I was kind of an atheist, but I also wasn't. So I think, I just didn't commit to any specific religion, and it took me a while to get out of that confusion state to actually understand something. And
Do you think the reason maybe everybody had such a hard time explaining things to you is because we didn't really understand it ourselves well enough?
I do, but I also think that when it comes to religion, I don't think everybody knows everything. I think even if you are a high-ranking member in the religion, like a guru or a priest, I don't think you know everything, but I do think that the way we grew up, because we were exposed to so many religions, it all got mixed up a little bit. So we try to explain one religion but end up on the other. And the confusing part about it was, how could I follow something when I believe in all of it? Or how do I believe in all of it when all of it has the same path and you're not doing the same thing for each religion? Like if you're Islam, you fast for Ramadan. If you're Tamil, you have your specific fasts during the year. If you're Christian or Catholic like me, you do Lent. So we have all these different things in the religion, but in the end, it all amounted to the same meaning to me. So I think the explanations I was given was very similar to each other for each religion.
And now, even though you are a practicing Christian, how do you feel about witnessing the other religions, because that still happens in your house?
It doesn't really affect me. I think I grew up with it, like from a very young age, we did a lot of it. Like my granny used to fast for Ramadan, and then after Ramadan it would be Pratasi, and then only recently I started practicing for Lent. So it doesn't really affect me because I'm so used to it already. Mm-hmm. So because I was brought up with it, I think for me it's normal. If there's not a fast going on in the house, that doesn't feel right. Because like there's always somebody fasting. I mean, I have a friend who fasts almost 9 out of the 12 months of the year, and I don't know how he does it, but he does it. But it doesn't really affect me too much.
I think it's pretty cool because I think not a lot of people can have that kind of like understanding where it's part of your life. Now, this is a true testing question. What do you know about your own history and heritage, and how your forefathers made their way from India to South Africa, and what generation South African Indian are you?
So, I don't know a lot. I do know I am 5th generation, because somebody told me about it. I won't mention names, but somebody did tell me I'm a 5th generation. But I don't really know too much. We do always have conversations about it in the house, especially around family gatherings and my great-granny's birthday. We always talk about it, but I don't think I ever really paid attention to it.
Is it because it's just not something that interests you, or do you just think you're not at the age where that is something you feel is important?
I don't think that I'm not interested in it. I do think that finding out about where you came from is interesting. Like, it's like taking a DNA test and, I don't know, all of a sudden you're 1% Fijian and you want to go live there. But I think I'm at a point in my life where I do want to know where I come from, but also I don't want it to define me. I think that I'm at a point in my life where I don't want it to define me. And it might, I don't know yet, but I haven't really had the interest to look into it, but probably one day I will.
So lucky you have an auntie that's doing all of this, huh?
Yeah, it makes life a lot easier for me.
So one day when that urge hits you, you can just...
Spotify. Yeah.
Just listen to this whole podcast. Now, let's talk a little bit about school, right? And there's two aspects to school I want to talk about. So school in the sense of, firstly, academically, coming from, I don't know if you'd call our home a typical Indian household, but I mean, okay, I don't know. I was pretty strict on you.
I remember.
Yes. I think I was the stricter one from everybody. But what was that like academically? Did you feel a lot of pressure that you had to perform and do well and go in a specific direction, or what was that like?
I think growing up, I had a lot of pressure academically because I wasn't a sporty person in primary school. I mean, out of all four of us, my brothers, I was the only one who didn't do a sport from grade 1 to grade 7. I did try, but I eventually just gave up on it. So academically, I felt more pressured to excel there. I think I did for a while, and I actually looked back on my marks the other day and I realized how much it's dropped since then because there was a lot of pressure back then compared to now.
Ooh, things you're telling the wrong auntie.
Yeah, but I also wouldn't call our house a typical Indian household because even though we were strict on academics, we weren't too strict about it. Like, I mean, a lot of the Indian people I know that are currently living in South Africa, their parents want them to at least get an 80%. Because if you get 70%, where's the other 30%? Why don't you know the other 30%? I think for us, my mother first wanted us to get 80s. Like that was what her ideal mark was. And I mean, I did for a while, but I don't count primary school because 1 + 1 does equal 2. And that's as far, that's your 80% right there. And I think up until grade 5, I did really well. I mean, I was one of the highest academics in my grade. I have medals and stuff for it, but as soon as I changed primary schools, it got a lot harder. When I changed primary schools, I wasn't a top 3 anymore or a top 5 academic learner anymore. And I wasn't sitting too badly. Like, I wasn't on the verge of failing, but I wasn't on the verge of distinctions. I was kind of in the middle. And I think, yeah, from then, there wasn't really any pressure on it. And when I got to high school, my brother was there first. He started playing rugby and I said, okay, cool, I'll try it out as well. I really enjoyed it. The first season I played, I got most improved player of the year. And that also gave me a boost to focus on sports as well as academics. But I think my academics did take a big hit when I started sports. And I did try and improve on it through the years, but it stayed pretty much stable. I got bachelor's passes every year. And I don't think it was a problem in our household too much.
I don't think you had the same kind of pressure that, like, I didn't even have actually, but that your mother had. In terms of you have to make sure that you are getting, like, the highest mark that you possibly can, and you are going to study, something or whatever. It was kind of always just open-ended to you guys for like, what do you want to do and how do we help you work towards that? Yeah,
I mean, looking back at high school, I did have quite a few Indian friends, and there was a very big difference between all of us. Like, one of the guys had to do science and maths core, and then on the other end, I was doing geography and consumer studies. I mean, the rest of us, we didn't really do any hectic subjects. I know a couple of us did maths core, but none of us were forced into doing any specific subjects. We kind of had a freedom to choose for our own. And yeah, I don't think it was such a big deal in our household.
I think the only thing I really tried to do was get you all to read. But oh my gosh. Yeah, what an incredibly difficult process. I definitely tried and failed.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather watch a movie.
Obviously. Okay, and then the second point is talking about rugby. So you boys were the first in the family to actually play rugby, and it's not something that you hear of quite often as Indian boys playing rugby, because I know our family was all very shocked.
So it did come as a shock to everybody. I do know that, because when we joined, we did get a lot of support, but also a couple people asked, are we crazy? And not in a bad sense, but there was cricket, there wasn't really much of soccer or football, I guess. I mean, if you had to play those kind of sports, you'd probably have to join a club nearby. But I think I enjoyed rugby more than I actually have any other sport.
What did you enjoy most about it?
I think it was the discipline and the respect you had to have to play the sport. It was called a hooligan's game played by gentlemen.
And soccer is a gentleman's game played by hooligans.
Yes. I think that was the defining factor for me. That's why I really wanted to play it. It wasn't really a big thing when I got to high school, especially among my friends. I mean, I was one of the first guys out of all my friends to actually go and play. And I remember one of my friends joined after me, and he was like, yeah, I think this is what I'm going to do now. And eventually we convinced almost all our friends to join. Obviously, not all of them wanted to join. A lot of them were better at football than they were at rugby, so they stuck to that. A couple good cricket players that also played rugby with us, and they enjoyed rugby better than cricket. And it wasn't just for the physical part of it, or for the how fast can I run, how badly can I step you, how fast can I take you down, or any of that sort. But I do think that it was the discipline I had to have to actually be consistent and keep up with everybody else. That was probably most why I wanted to play.
Okay, so rugby is your favorite sport to play. What's your favorite sport to watch?
So there's a couple. I watch a lot of sports, and I think you know this.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite to watch is football. It's the most disappointing for me currently.
Why is that, Kishan?
Because I support United.
Well, I'll say. Why us little Red Devils for now?
Yeah. But I think as much as I enjoy football, it is my favorite sport to watch. It's really a close up there with rugby. I think rugby is a really, really close second. And if you watch, most of our plays in high school came from the Springboks or the Lions or the Blue Bulls. We would adapt some of their plays and we would use it as our own, with our own little twists. And yeah, so I think that watching football, it is more enjoyable, but watching rugby is more informational. And it does give you a lot more insights to the game.
Now, if you have to look at yourself as a South African Indian male who grew up in Johannesburg and literally spent all your life there, what are some of the things from your childhood, your life, your home that really stand out to you as being very unique to South African Indians, to that identity of yours?
Being an Indian who grew up in Joburg, we do get compared a lot to the Indians who grew up in Durban, but I think the biggest difference, or what I've noticed living in Joburg, is that in Joburg you do get a lot more exposure to everybody else living around you. So even though I'm Indian, growing up in Joburg, like I told you, I noticed at a very young age I'm actually Indian, but it doesn't really affect me. I think the biggest difference is that unless you grew up in a really big Indian community, like maybe in Asia South, you don't really notice everybody else around you. So growing up in Joburg, it did expose me to a lot more people in terms of other races. I think in Joburg what stands out the most is our community is not based around our family and friends. It's based around the strangers living next door. Somebody's having a braai, you know about it. And they might not be Indian, they might not be white, black colored, but they know you know about it, and usually you get invited if they like you. Some neighbors
I
you don't
think that's
like.
your generation, because I think us growing up, we didn't have that. Except for the time that we were in the flat, because we obviously were so close to those neighbors, but now moving house to house and stuff, I think the neighbors are very isolated. I think it's your friends that you'll have that with, or maybe you guys have that experience of actually being invited, but your parents probably don't.
I do think that is probably, it is my generation, but I think we moved around so much. I think moving around actually pointed out certain things in certain areas, especially in Joburg. You don't really know your neighbors, but if you know when they're having a braai and stuff, and usually that's when you get to talk to them, because they always come to warn you about the music or how late they're going to finish off. But what stands out is if you're living in Durban, you don't really get much exposure to a lot of people, because you usually just stick to your group or your family, and that's the people you go out with, that's the people you spend time with. In Joburg, I know me and a really close friend of mine, we go out to a random club or we go out to a random day out and we make friends with everybody. I think people who live in Joburg are really friendly, and yeah, that's one of the biggest things that sticks out to me.
That is good for your generation, because for our generation, we found more sense of community in Durban than we did in Joburg. So while in Joburg, I think, in my days of going out and stuff, I found it easy to make friends, but that's because of who I am. But I noticed a lot of other people in my circle struggled to make friends in Joburg because people were very cliquey. Where in Durban, it felt more like welcoming as an Indian person, where people would accept you a little easier. Maybe that's for my generation. So it's nice to see that you guys are having a different experience.
So I do think that, especially around my friends, and even in high school, there were certain jokes and certain words we used that I think only another Indian would identify. And I think it's also the fact that all our parents were very similar, not in terms of how they acted, but in terms of the decisions they made. So I know up until I was in grade 11, all my friends and all their parents had a 2-day no, like you can't have fun 2 days in a row. So if you went out on a Friday or a Saturday, you can't go out the next day, or you can't have friends over the next day. If it was a sleepover, they were to be gone by 10 o'clock. But I think the biggest thing that did stand out was probably the slang, because the way we greet each other, it's different to how most people greet each other. The way we talk to each other, it's mostly different, because I think growing up in Joburg, we try to impersonate and make the Durban accent sound funnier. And because most people look at South African Indians and associate them to Durban, I think we try and impersonate those accents and bring it with us.
But do you realize that you've actually just found a thread back to like your identity by doing that? Because that's literally, it's who you are.
I think now I realize it.
I think that's pretty cool. You should be proud of it.
I am. I think growing up in Joburg itself, and especially around my friends, I didn't just have Indian friends. Actually, my first friend was a colored guy. His name is Jade. Really close friend of mine. If you know me, you know Jade. He was my first and closest friend, still is to this day. And when I used to stay by his house a lot when I was younger, and he introduced me to a lot of things that I wasn't exposed to. Culturally. And I also used to teach him a lot of Indian slang. So when he does come around, he does have that Indian accent sometimes.
So he can fit in with the rest of the group of friends.
Exactly. Oh, and also, I recently learned to play Thunee. I think I only learned to play Thunee in grade 11, if I'm not mistaken. It really does bring a lot of Indians together in a very weird way. I used to watch my older family, like not even your generation, the generation above you. So my granny, her brothers, they all used to sit around the table and play Thunee, and I never knew what the game was.
Yeah.
And only up until grade 11 or so, I actually found out how to play the game. It took me a while, and I was really bad at it. But my brothers and I have made so many friends now through that game. A lot of the guys we play Thunee with are the guys we only met because we played Thunee.
And now they're like part of your core group of friends.
Yes. It's a really weird game to explain to other people. Besides Indians, I don't know how to explain the game. I think when I explain it to other people, I just say it's an over-complicated maths game. Because the main thing you do there is count. If you don't keep count, the Indian uncle sitting across you will slap you with a chair.
Do you know I don't know how to play Thunee?
Seriously?
Yeah. I never learned because I didn't have like anybody around at that time to play. I was either the youngest person or the oldest child around. So I never had anybody to like show me. So maybe one day you can teach me when you come for your next visit.
I think you can learn it, just have to play it a bit. Like,
we'll see.
I learned through practice.
Yeah,
it's not that badly.
We'll see.
Just needs count. I know you have trouble with that sometimes.
I do have a lot of trouble. I'm a bad Indian. I can't count. I think it's really cool. I think it's just an unspoken thing that you'll find people who are Indian who will play Thunee, who will play pool, who will, do the same things and understand the same things, speak the same slang. And you having so many friends who are not Indian, what's the one thing they find most interesting about how things happen in your house?
I think the thing that they find most interesting, I think especially to Indians who don't exactly live in a traditional Indian household, and let me give a quick example. I have a friend who's Indian, but he's not traditionally Indian, he's Christian. And
so he's Indian, he's just not Hindu.
Yeah. And I think he fits into this category in a little bit of some way or the other. But he loves the color and how we present ourselves and traditional clothing we wear. And a lot of my other friends who aren't Indian say the same thing. I think the thing that stands out to them and the thing that they question the most is our clothing isn't bland. Yeah. And our traditions aren't bland in terms of color. We like to have bright colors. We like to have multiple colors. I mean, take your wedding, for example. I wore a salmon pink suit. Yeah. You won't find me wearing a salmon pink suit anywhere else. I wore it to my squire's ball and your wedding. Only person to do it. But I had a lot of questions about why do we use so much color and why do we have so many different prayers. I know one of the girls who came to your wedding that you invited, she was sitting with Lucian and asking him a lot of questions about it. And I think our tradition stands out the most to them. And once you explain it to them, they actually do enjoy it. They actually do understand it, they enjoy it, and they always want to take part in it.
Yeah, I think, if I think back to the wedding alone, I think y'all's group of friends were actually the most involved in everything. And not because we needed anybody to like run around or do stuff. It's just because they wanted to be there for absolutely everything. From the time the decor went up to even before planning what we were going to do and getting involved in doing the surprise dance for Mikhail, stuff like that, and making sure that they were also dressed accordingly. I think they were really excited about it and being there. Everybody wanted to be there for the actual ceremonies and to understand what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're doing it, and doing it themselves.
Yeah, I think our friends were most excited because we grew up Indian, right? But slowly, some of our traditions are dying out or fading away. Like, we look at older generations and their traditions compared to our traditions. It does differ a little bit. So the most important part to our friends that day or that 2-3 weeks was, what are we going to do? Can we do this? Can we help with this? Okay, what does this mean? Okay, we're going to do the dance now. Let's all get involved.
Yeah.
I think the dance was the most exciting part about it because we were all of us were front and center. Besides the groom and the bride, we were the next important people.
No, that's true. I think even till now, you're all still, get together.
Yeah, we still know the dance. We still know the dance.
Everybody just does this dance and you'll randomly get a video.
It's a little bit scary how we still most of us know the dance, and some of the boys who I didn't think could move actually really moved that day. So I think we enjoyed it because we also don't want our traditions to die out, especially now because a lot of Indians are not going the traditional route with weddings especially, and a lot of the boys were interested in it because you did decide to go the traditional route and they wanted to be involved because the meaning is what they wanted to know most about.
Do you think people of my generation do a good job of trying to pass down these things like how previous generations have passed down to us? Or do you think we should be doing better at keeping our customs and traditions alive?
I think a bit of both. I think if I compare it to your wedding, I didn't understand a lot of it. But through the wedding itself, I learned a lot. As somebody who's not Hindu or Tamil and somebody who's Catholic, I think understanding the wedding was my favorite part about it. Not just being involved, but getting to understand what each ritual and each symbol, anything about it, what each of it meant. I think the older generation did to explain a lot of it, but I think having to get to that point of getting to the wedding only to find out what it's about then is what we kind of losing track on, because a lot of my friends didn't know about the wedding until the rituals until it happened. And the meaning behind it was a bit lost to us because nobody was there to explain it to us, because it's not traditionally the questions we ask.
Yeah, like nobody really understood why you tie a thali and why you put on toe rings and
yes,
the meaning of the trays and why somebody's going to stand behind you and stuff like that.
Yes, and the older generation on the day did explain it to us really well, but I think
our guru explained it really well. But
yeah,
the actual people in the family, like the grannies and the older people would just normally tell us, you just have to do it because that's how it's done. We always do that.
Exactly. So I think that's the part where I think we could do better, especially the older generations. Whereas instead of just telling somebody to do it, explain why we do it. I know the guru that did your wedding and the guru that blessed our new house recently, they explained it really well.
Yeah.
But the older generation, like you said, it's just do this because that's how it was done.
Let's hope my generation do a better job at making sure we explain and pass things down properly. Now, before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to ask you about what your experience has been here visiting, because the first international trip, we did as a family was to Thailand, and you were much younger back then. So I don't know if you really took note of anything or if there were any culture shocks that you were exposed to.
I think Thailand, the biggest thing for me was, I was young, so I didn't really feel much of a difference because everything was just explained through my mother. She would, you guys would explain things to me and it was all just simplified for me. But the biggest thing in Thailand for me was food. That's literally the biggest thing. But
and all the islands.
Yeah.
And the activities and stuff.
Yeah, most of those. But because you guys were around, it was easier to understand. And it didn't really come as a shock.
Mm-hmm.
But coming here, first time traveling alone to a foreign country, I think the biggest thing was the safety. In South Africa, I think for all peoples, we always have to look over our shoulder at night, or
in the day for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. We always looking over our shoulder. We always worried about, if somebody comes to our gate and asking for something, we open it, boom, get robbed.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me was safety, because we walk around freely here. In the Netherlands, we walk around freely. I know my uncle, he just leaves his wallet on the table. He'll go to the bathroom in a restaurant. Everything's in the open.
I mean, it's still a bad habit, if you ask me. But it's like, something that is not the end of the world if you do it in most places here, though.
Yes.
Not all.
Yeah, I know. Like in Amsterdam, I was warned about pickpocketing, but that's all I was warned about. So I think the biggest thing was the safety. And the other thing I would say is food here is very different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not really a culture shock, but it is a kind of a shock because it's not what I'm used to having. And the people. Like, I know in South Africa, people look at us and say, oh, you guys are friendly, this and that. But not all of us are friendly. Just depends where you go. And coming here, I think not everybody's friendly, but they're not also, violent towards you or like aggressive towards you. They just mind their own business here.
But I think that was also different compared to which towns you were in. So
yes.
I think you had a different experience being in the town that we live in versus like when we went visiting to Amsterdam.
I think the town that you guys live in is probably my favorite because it's peaceful, it's quiet.
Stadskanaal for the win.
It's peaceful, it's quiet. It's there's not a lot of people here. I think the population in this town was, you said 30,000?
Yeah.
And it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't.
It doesn't feel like a lot.
It doesn't feel like a lot. I went to Groningen as well, and there it's more of a student life.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of students there. There's a big forum there that I enjoyed just walking around and seeing how the student life is lived there. But then I also went to a place like Amsterdam, and a lot noisier, a lot more tourists, and I enjoyed it there. I really did. But I'm a peaceful guy. I like peaceful towns.
So the introvert in you is saying that this is your place.
Not the introvert, the lazy part of me.
The lazy
part of me is enjoying living in Stadskanaal. I mean, the shop is 10 meters away. Basically. And yeah, I think between all the towns I visited, I did have different welcomings in each town. I know Stadskanaal is more traditional in the Dutch sense.
Yeah.
Groningen, I don't know how to explain it there. It's more of an international place because of the university. Like, they're not traditional, but they're also not traditional.
It's a little bit of a balance.
Yeah. But then you go to a place like Amsterdam where tradition feels lost.
And that's because it's kind of a different way of living there. So
Yes.
that is more, liberal and stuff. Not that the rest of the country is not.
I think Amsterdam is, you go there to have a good time. And, most of the time you do have a good time. It's like living in Joburg, you go to Pretoria just to have a nice, fun night out. And then you're back in Joburg, back to work. That's how most of the students see it nowadays.
Pretty much.
But yeah.
Okay. And now you're heading back. You're literally almost making your way back to South Africa after being here for a couple of months. What are some of the things you're looking forward to going back home to?
I think I'm looking forward to probably graduating the most right now because it's the start of my career basically. I also think I'm looking forward to actually getting a job, my first job technically.
Mm-hmm.
And start working for myself, start making some money for myself. But I'm also looking forward to my family, my friends at home. I haven't seen them in a really long time and they all complain about my communication issues.
Yes.
Because I'm not like your typical young teenage boy anymore. I don't like my phone.
Yep.
I hate WhatsApp. I hate Instagram. I think the only apps I actually use on my phone now is YouTube. And that's about it. Maybe a little bit of Google. If I'm lost on a question, I hardly use WhatsApp anymore. If you look at my Instagram page, I post every 6 months to a year. I don't really interact with many people. So yeah, I think just going back to spending some time with them. I don't have a lot of time with them because most of them are working and I'm going back on a very odd day.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't be able to see everybody at the same time, which is okay for me. I don't like crowded places.
Yeah, because you're literally going from also being in a place where there's hardly anybody. You haven't really interacted with many people other than us at home. And now you're going to go back literally to a full house because everybody is dying to see you.
Yes, especially my mother. She complains about me every day.
Your mother.
I know she tells you a lot of the time that I don't talk to her, I don't love her, and all that other things.
Standard mother.
Yeah.
Tunes.
Auntie tunes. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to seeing them. And I think just being back in South Africa, the culture there is different. It's, as a South African, as much as we want to travel everywhere and as much as we complain about our country sometimes, our culture is very different to most. We are more accepting than most of the other countries and other cultures in general.
And will you be returning?
100%.
That's the right answer.
Just for a vacation. I just think I needed a vacation after all the stress back at home. I just needed a break, and I think everybody does. And I took mine as soon as I could.
1 year studying as a pastry chef, and that stress.
Hey.
Shifts. And this is your life now.
Yeah, I think
it's going to be your life.
Yeah.
Okay. So to then wrap up, I know we've really enjoyed having you around. I think the dogs are really going to miss you the most. Bagel is literally going to be crying for a week at your door. But it's been great, having a piece of home, I think, for us here with us. That's always an amazing feeling. So we're definitely going to miss you, but we do look forward to you coming back. And now I know you'll be more comfortable coming back because you've traveled on your own. You know exactly where you're coming to again. So that's a really good thing. But the final question is really one to just define you. And that is, Kishan Nadasen, what kind of South African Indian are you?
So I'm definitely not a traditional South African Indian. I'm not what you would think. I do look like one. A lot of people do tell me that. Like, they could spot me out in a crowd and be like, yeah, he's Indian. And not because of my skin color, but because of my beard, my tone of voice, and the accent I make when I'm out. But yeah, I'm not the traditional kind. I do love our traditions. I do love our culture. But as you know, I'm Catholic. So I am more open and more accepting to other cultures and other traditions. I don't know a lot about my history, as you just found out. And I think that's the kind of South African Indian I am. I don't know how else to put it.
A non-traditional South African Indian.
Yeah. I like Thunee, I like biryani, I like curry. But I am more South African than Indian itself. I was born and raised in South Africa. Not even in the typical Indian areas where we came from. I was born in Joburg, in Coronationville Hospital. Yeah, please go look it up if you ever get a chance. I don't see color. I think my generation, most of us, we want to know what's the good part about you. We don't want to find a problem with you. And I think that's kind of South African Indian I am.
Nice one, son. Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And that was great to hear a perspective from, I think, a different generation. My aim is still to get you to read more books. But until our next episode, Shup, sweet and aware. Lotsa love.